week again, our favourite time of the week, Fridays live. Now, I know some of you who are watching on Wednesday might have been expecting Ellie. Ellie's actually on a train right now, so you've got me today. So thanks for joining us. And let me know from where you're watching. I'm in London today. I can see we've got William from Cumbria, very cloudy, still warm. Yeah, it's very muggy here in London, but a change from that very hot weather we had over here in the UK. I hear it's hot in the US as well. Hi, Roz. Hi, Gina. Hi, Janet. Yes, we've got Jessie in the comments. And today we actually have a very special guest with us, Mike Asbesta. He'll be joining us in a little while to talk about a very exciting project, old railway accidents. So stay tuned for that. Got more people joining. Hi, Jill. Hi, Andrea. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Paul. So good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. Oh, hi, Sally. Oh, it's been great you can join us. Hi, Linda. Great to see you all. Okay, so we've got a bit of a railway theme today and also Second World War. So two different themes for you today. Our question of the week, which we will come back to later, is do you have any ancestors who were involved in the railways? So we'll come onto that in a little while. But yes, question of the week, do you have any ancestors who were involved in the railways? So it's time to introduce our 4 new record sets of the week, and these are a wonderful array of records, so detailed that we've got for you this week. It's a real treat. So on the menu for you today, we've got 3 brand new record sets that cover the Second World War. We've got the airmen who died in the Second World War, bomber command losses, and Sheffield air raid casualties. So some really interesting sets there. And we've also got some new burials for Yorkshire. So first up today is the airmen who died in the Second World War, 1939 to 1946. Now, there are nearly 130,000 new records in this set, and they give the names of the men and women who died under RAF control or under their own national air services during World War II. And this has been compiled by the Naval and Military Press, and this is the first time that this has ever been done. And we've got William's already had a match here. Had a quick look earlier at these records. Grandad's eldest brother is in the top 2 as he was a pilot officer who died on a return from a bombing raid. Oh, wow! What incredible to be able to find your ancestors one of these wonderful sets. So thanks for sharing that with us, William. So what you'll find in this set, you'll get the details of all the British, Commonwealth, Dominion and European airmen who died under RAF control or under the European Allied Air Services. So you'll find a real range of nationalities in this set. So from British, Indian, New Zealand, South African to European, got Belgian, Czech, French, Greek, Dutch, Norwegian, Polish, Yugoslavian, even Americans and some locally recruited pilots from Africa and the Middle East. And casualties could have occurred from a range of different reasons. So they record the accidents to those newly recruited pilots, to the deaths of the Battle of Britain fighter pilots, to veteran bomber crews, to those killed in training. And it's an incredibly detailed index. So as you can see here, I've listed all the different index items here, and there's a lot of detail. So name, service number, rank, service base, unit, nationality, to even the type of aircraft and the serial number of the aircraft. This level of detail is quite extraordinary. And then you get the information such as the date of death, the cause of death, even age at death, to the burial place or place of commemoration. So you do take a look at this wonderful set. And the picture here is from the Illustrated London News. That's one of our newspapers from 1940. And it shows some RAF pilots with models of German planes getting to know the enemy as it was there. And this photograph I came across in the Sphere, another one of our newspapers, also from 1940. I just thought this was fantastic. It's a low altitude photo of RAF planes over Norway. So good to sort of always have a browse between our different collections, really get that sense of history and of place. Now, this set is index only, but as I said, it's incredibly detailed. And I pulled out a record here, and this is a really special one. And you might recognise the name. It's Amy Johnson's record in this set. So I said men and women were involved in this particular record set. And this is the record of Amy Johnson, Britain's Amelia Earhart, who undertook incredible aerial feats during the 1930s. She's an absolutely inspiring lady. She emerged from total obscurity at the age of 26 to fly solo and to become the first British woman to fly solo from England all the way to Australia. And she became a worldwide celebrity. So when World War II broke out, she joined, along with other women, the Air Transport Auxiliary, the ATA, which fell under the wing of the RAF. And their job was to transport planes from factories to air bases across the country. And while flying with the ATA in January 1941, her plane ditched into the Thames and tragically, she was never found. So what can this record tell us? It can tell us a lot. We see Amy's name, we see her age, she was only 37, she was a first officer, and her function there as a pilot with the Air Transport Auxiliary, and we learn that she was part of the 5 ferry pilots pool. And we can also learn that she was flying in Oxford 2 with a serial number of VS3540, and she's based in Hatfield. And the note there is the cause of death is killed while flying. And there's even an account of how she was presumed to have lost her life. She bailed out over the Thames estuary after becoming lost in bad weather during a ferry flight from Prestwick to Kidlington, drowned. And Andrew's actually made a really good point here. Flying as Johnson, not Mollison. Mollison was her married name, but I think her marriage had, I think she divorced her husband by this point, so she'd gone back to her maiden name. A really good spot, actually, Andrew. I hadn't thought of that at all. So thanks for that. And a great deal of speculation surrounded the death of Amy Johnson, which was really compounded by her celebrity and the fact that she was never found. Some said that she was a victim of friendly fire, or that her plane was mistaken for an enemy aircraft. There were also rumours at the time that she was flying with a passenger. Those rumours were quashed, but it was really a tragic end to the life of a remarkable woman. And she'd actually taken up flying. She was walking past Croydon Aerodrome and just thought that was something she might like to do. So a really inspiring woman. And she became a celebrity, as I said, across the world, and broke lots of records, even those held by male pilots. And she's pictured here by the Dundee Courier when news of the accident broke. Okay, so from air transport to a slightly older and more grounded form of transport. And we're asking for this week's question of the week, do you have any ancestors who were involved in the railways? And I can see some answers coming through. So I will take these slides away. There I am. Okay, we've got Janet. It's Janet. A couple of railway guards. My late grandfather drove vans from railway stations and did deliveries. LMS, I believe. Thank you, Janet. Got some stories coming in. Pickles. My maternal great uncle lived in the station house at Ash Station in Surrey. Great uncle Alf was a station master there. I recall visiting as a small child and listening to the crockery on the kitchen shelves rattle every time a train went through the station. My mother, in turn, recalls her aunt telling her and her cousins off for hanging out the windows and getting smuts on their faces from the steam trains. And that, we do kind of romanticize the age of steam, I think, a lot, but the actual getting that dirt on one's face, that's very evocative memory there. Anya, nice to see you today, Anya. I did have ancestors who worked on the railways. One ancestor who ended up moving from the family home in Ayton in the Scottish Borders to Edinburgh. Another ancestor, I still can't decide if he worked on the railways or at the Tennant's factory. The death set isn't really clear. Yeah, more digging. We always like a bit more digging here, don't we? And we've got Andrea. My ancestor was a gland packer on the railways. I don't know what that is. We'll have to find out more about that one. Thanks, Andrea. Ellen, this is there's a lot of railway ancestors out there. And Ellen has a great-great-grandfather who was a conductor of a short line railroad in Cleveland, Ohio. Great. And we've got Liam. Hi, Liam. Familiar name there. Welcome. A great-grand-uncle Richard Downs, of previous Facebook Live fame, worked on the railways in Ireland and did the same thing when he emigrated to New York. He's heavily involved in the union side of things too. Oh, fascinating, Liam. Thank you. And let's see if we've got any more coming in. For the World War II theme, Megan, her grandfather was a US Army doctor in World War II. Oh, amazing. Yeah, that's definitely worth more research into Megan. There's some great records out there. Just scrolling through. I've got a lot of railway ancestors. On my mother's side, basically everybody was on the Great Western Railway on her side of the family. Andrew. A distant cousin was a driver of a train when it hit loose coal wagons near Wigan in 1874. Seriously injured, they had another child and drove till 1907. And the newspapers tell it all. Gosh, that's what I just love about the newspapers. And I think I probably shared this with, I think it was probably my first Facebook live with you, Friday's Live, talks about my great-great-grandfather, Alfred Small, who was an engine driver and sadly was involved in an accident. He sadly hit someone in the dark outside of Reading, and he had no idea what had happened. So yes, and that I found out through the newspapers. We've got Paul, grandfather and great-grandfather platelets on the railway. John Dudson witnessed a man kill himself on the railway and appeared in a story I found in all newspapers. This is going to come up, I think, when we talk to Mike just in a second, how these newspaper stories talks about accidents on the railway, and it is just so fascinating what you can find in our newspapers pertaining to those working on the railways. Just seeing if we've got any more. Sue Moon, another railway ancestor, a cell hand on the railway before going into the REME in World War II. Fantastic. Let's see if any more have come in. Okay, Gina. The 1881 census, my great-great-grandfather was listed as a railway timekeeper's wife, and great-great-grandfather wasn't listed on the census with the family. Ooh, an interesting one there, Gina. Definitely more to discover. And we have an answer from Andrew about the role that I was not familiar with. A gland is a seal to stop steam leaking out of the cylinder around the piston rod. Thank you, Andrew. Wonderful. I love how I'm always learning new things on Facebook Lives. That's great stuff. And over on YouTube, maternal grandfather worked for Canadian Pacific following World War One. Sally, sadly, no railway ancestors, but a trip to the Railway Museum in Swindon, and has a certificate for being a good points changer. Amazing. I love that. I'm gonna have to go and visit. I do love the railways, and I love a railway museum. Victoria, lots of ancestors on both sides worked on the railways. Did it run in families, and that easier to get a job if a relation was employed? Possibly. I mean, I know my great grandfather and then my grandfather were on the GWR, so maybe that was a way in. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to bring Mike in now, Mike Asbesta. It's great to have you with us today. He's a senior lecturer in history at the University of Portsmouth, and he is a driving force in the Railway Work, Life and Death Project, and has compiled and with volunteers a wonderful database of old railway accidents in Britain. So Mike, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi Rose, thanks for having me on, and lovely to see all the comments coming through as well. That's great. I think we'll be able to talk about some of those.
Definitely. So to start off with, could you tell us a little bit about the database?
Yeah, sure. So we have been working for many years now, 5 or 6 years, to try to pull together and make more easily available online records of accidents to railway workers in Britain and Ireland. Mainly Britain, but there are several hundred Irish cases in this new data set of around 17,000 cases that we've just released this week, and we're really keen for people to get using. One of the great things about it is, we think, not just that obviously it does contain the accident, so whilst we hope that people find details in there that are of use to them, it does generally mean something pretty unfortunate has happened, which isn't great. But even if you don't find your ancestors in there, what you will find in there, if you've got railway ancestors, is details of the sorts of jobs and the sorts of things that they would have been doing. So if you know what role they were undertaking, you will find almost certainly that role listed in the database and be able to say, all right, that's the sort of thing that on a day-to-day basis my ancestor was doing.
Oh, absolutely fascinating. And I think Jessie's got the link for us. So Jessie, if you could pop that in the chat so people can go and have a look. It's a really, I had a browse earlier, so it's a really wonderful collection. So can you tell us a little bit more about how this database has been compiled and the work that's gone into it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing to say on this is a massive thanks to all of the volunteers who've been involved in this. And we've had volunteer teams formally through our partner institutions, at the National Railway Museum, at the Modern Record Centre at the University of Warwick, and we're working with the National Archives as well. The volunteers have done the hard work on this one. This data set that we just released has been the work of the National Railway Museum's team. And I know that they've put thousands of hours into summarising and transcribing these accident records, which otherwise you'd need to take a trip to Kew to see, or up to York to the National Railway Museum. So they've done a huge service to everyone. What we've asked them to do is to transcribe all of the key details, so all the name information, ages, where it's given, location, the role, the railway company people are working for, and in a couple of categories, we've had to ask people to summarise. So this is about the more detailed, the more lengthy explanation of the accident, because if we'd asked them to transcribe the full thing, it would have taken forever and we wouldn't be able to get any accident records out to you. So we took the decision it's more important to get a summary, a good summary, but also to make sure that if anyone did want to follow up on the detail, they've got details of how and where to find the records in the physical copies.
Yeah, it's an amazing piece of work, and yeah, big thanks to those volunteers. It's such an amazing undertaking. It really is. And just sort of curious about sort of what kind of accidents you see. Sort of is there a sort of more common accident that comes up, or is it quite varied? Would you say?
It's quite varied. I mean, lots of the accidents do involve movement, so the moving things, whether it's the coaches, the locos, the wagons. Not all of them do by any stretch of the imagination, because the railways as companies did all sorts of things. They operated ships. I saw one of the comments going through saying that an ancestor was a van driver or carter, and yet they had to deliver from stations, so they had road vehicles as well. And so on. But most of the cases we see do involve the movement of vehicles, which tended to be the more dangerous things. So very often it's when they're moving goods, wagons around, and unfortunately people get in the way of them, either hands pinched or sometimes bodies trapped, sometimes knocked down by trains. But yeah, there's an awful lot of variety in there. It really, I think it bears a search through and spending a bit of time getting to grips with it.
Yeah, and I suppose health and safety wasn't quite what it was today. No, not at all.
Not, no, really not. And that becomes dramatically clear with the records when you get to them. You look at them something, you think, how could that have been possible?
Yeah. Oh, incredible. And are there any particularly unusual or interesting cases that you've come across?
So I was expecting a question like this. I had a look through and I pulled out a few examples, but one of I think one of the points about what we've been doing is really the typical stuff, those everyday accidents that did just happen and weren't much reported or really didn't make the big attention in the way that a passenger crash would do. We find some huge variety of cases in the database. For example, we've got people from ages 7 through to age 82, and the 7-year-old case is really quite sad. We've got a young boy and a friend who went to help one of the children. We don't have a first name, but we know H. Lee. He was the 8-year-old. Went to help his father, who was a coal carter, to collect some coal from Harrogate Station. And one of the children, Sue Powell, got up onto the line and unfortunately died when he was hit by a coal wagon. And the coal carter's son, H. was had his hand crushed again as he got it in the way of the wagon. So there are some, obviously there's a lot of sad stories in there, but important to record. What's quite interesting about that one as well is that it was these two people, the two boys affected, they weren't railway workers. So whilst most of the cases in the new data release are railway workers, we've got about 800 who had some reason to be around the railways but weren't working for the railways. So we talk mainly about railway staff, but actually there are a lot of other people in there as well. We've got one case, again an oddity, where we have an Egyptian student who'd come over from Egypt with a cohort, so Mohammed El Zahiri, to learn the trade. Who's training, I think, presumably to be an engineer. Now, whether that means engineering in the sense of structural engineering, buildings and what have you, or that kind of engineering, or an engineer in the sense of working on the railways, is slightly unclear. But unfortunately, he was on a steam engine, or getting back onto a steam engine at Walthamstow when it was moving off, and he got crushed between the engine and the shed door and died. But again, these kind of things, we kind of expect them to be just British or Irish cases, but there aren't. There's a huge amount of variety in there.
It's just extraordinary, and to have that lower age limit of 7, and such a tragic accident, and to have those different nationalities in there, just so very interesting. And I did touch on, I mean, there's been a theme coming through in the comments about newspapers and how people have been able to find accounts of accidents on the railway to their ancestors in the newspapers. And have the newspapers been useful to you with this project?
Very much so. One of the brilliant things about the newspapers is that because it's a local press, they do often take an interest in local cases, local accidents, particularly with fatalities, where they tend to reprint, if not verbatim, and really good summaries of the coroner's inquests, which you don't have as surviving records for England and Wales. Slightly different case in Scotland, of course. But there, they give us really brilliant insight into what was going on. So whilst the information we have in the accident report for Mohammed El Zahiri's case, for example, tells us quite a bit about the operation of the railway and so on, it doesn't tell us much more than that about El Zahiri, the man, whereas the newspaper reports did tell us that bit more. So that putting the two sets of records together, and then of course allying them with census records and other civil registration documents, is really, really helpful as far as the official kind of data sets and official records go. What's been really, really wonderful and gratifying has been where we've had input from family historians, where just as so many people are doing down the side, there's got in touch, say, oh, my ancestor was on the railways. We've had a couple of cases already from this new data set where people have got in touch to say, oh, my grandfather, my great grandfather, I found him in your database, and we're then able to start a discussion with them a bit to get that much more the personal side, the family insight, and what it meant for the family when their ancestor was involved in an accident. And that's really important to us, given that one of the dangers with this, there are so many people killed or injured. One of the dangers is that we just think of the big numbers, the big statistics, tens of thousands being injured each year, hundreds being killed. We lose sight of the individual potentially. What our database, and particularly working with the newspapers, other record sets and family historians, allows us to do is really to see the individual and the impact that their accident had on their family, the wider community, and so many people. It's brilliant, and I love that collaborative working.
Yeah, it's a complete sort of 360 look at with all those resources, and to be able to humanize these people and to sort of look beyond the statistics, as you say. I think it's a really wonderful project, and I often wonder the impact. My great grandfather who was involved in an accident in 1916 and accidentally hit someone, and I wonder how that stayed with him. And I know he wasn't a very nice man, and he, in his old age, he was rather a scary old fellow, and from my mum's account. So I wonder whether that just had an impact on him.
I wouldn't be at all surprised. We've had one case, again, someone getting in touch with us to say, I think it's her great grandfather witnessed, in a similar sort of way, witnessed an accident, and it stayed with him for the rest of his life. And it was known in the family that this was a really difficult subject for him. So it must have had a huge impact.
I'm sure it did. And we've got a couple of questions coming in. We've got Andrew's asked a question here. Are you interested in accidents on construction or colliery railways?
Absolutely. So one of the tricky things, again, the data that we've got at the moment, the record sets are the official reports that were produced by the Railway Inspectorate. So they relate only to the railways, and they don't cover the railway workshops or factories. They were reported to the Factory Inspectorate, and unfortunately, those records don't exist in the same way that they do for the railways, the mainline railways. There were loads of accidents on, in terms of constructing railways, but also for colliery railways, private railways, so industrial railways. There's a project, yes, absolutely, we're definitely interested in that aspect. We don't capture enough of it, but always interested in more on that.
Oh, fantastic. That's a very good question. Thank you, Andrew. And Anya's mentioned that her grandfather lost a big toe when a coal cart rolled over his foot in a coal mine rather than the railways. So yeah, again, we've seen that coming through. And I was just wondering, because we all seem to have someone involved in the railways today. Do you know how, sort of roughly in Victorian times, how many people were there working on the railway at any one time? Is there an idea of just the amount of people who were involved in that industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got reasonably good statistics for the 20th century, less so for the 19th century, but later 19th century, looking anywhere from 300,000 upwards. It grows, increases. So just before the First World War, you've got just under 640,000 people working on the railways, of whom about, as far as we can tell, about 15,000 were women. So whilst women were in a small minority, there were probably quite a few more women than we might expect working on the railways. And again, one of the comments that came through earlier, Pickles mentioned about the oh no, it wasn't Pickles, it was someone else, sorry, I forget who, I did see it go past. Someone mentioned that their I think great grandmother was recorded as a timekeeper, but the great grandfather wasn't recorded, or timekeeper's wife. And absolutely, there's a strong link in families in terms of employment on the railways, but women, very often you'd find that they were gatekeepers, so opening, closing level crossing gates, whilst their husband was a permanent weighman or a track worker, so someone maintaining the railway lines. So you quite often find women at work in some capacity on the railways, and sometimes in roles that did expose them to danger. So some of the female cases that we've got in the database are of gatekeepers when they've been trying to open or close a gate and been hit by a train in the process.
Wow, I had no idea. That's absolutely fascinating. Wow. And what's next for the project? Were there going to be more records released? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So the first priority is doing what we're doing now. Thank you so much again for this. Is getting people knowing about what we're doing and using the new data set. So to all of you out there, do please go and check us out, make use of it. Please, if you find people in there that you're looking for or places, let us know. We love to hear that. And that's also something that the volunteers like to hear. We feed it back to them. They know what they're doing kind of behind the scenes, but it's when they then get the feedback to say, these people have been in touch and said, thanks very much, this is great, what have you. That's great. And that really helps them. What we're also quite keen to do, again, to build on the current data set, is to get people involved a bit more. So, if you do find an ancestor in there, by all means, please let us know. We're really keen to feature blog posts on our project blog from other people about their family experiences and their ancestors who had accidents, whether or not they're found in our database. So we're keen to explore that. So please, by all means, get in touch. As to what's next, well, this data set's taken a while to prepare, as you can imagine. There's a lot in it, and also to get right, to do the data cleaning, the checking on. Although if you do find an error, you will do, because nothing, it's always going to happen. Please let us know, and we'll correct it when we next go through and revise. But since then, the volunteers have been transcribing more records. So we're working currently on two fronts. One with trade union records, so records from what's now the RMT, but was the National Union of Railwaymen, that held at the Modern Record Centre at Warwick. And they've got a huge amount of records in, particularly about what happened after an accident. So whether it's payments for compensation, disability, or payments to widows for orphans who were left behind. Because for this period, the legal definition of an orphan was a fatherless child. So it wasn't that both parents had died. So you quite often find the mother still surviving, but being paid some sort of allowance from the union to help with the upkeep and maintenance of the children. So that's going to be the next data set we're looking to release. And again, we're looking at tens of thousands of records in that. And we're working with a team at the National Archives on the railway company records. That was going to be a bit longer term before it reaches us. There's a strong South Wales coverage in that. But there again, we're looking at tens of thousands of records. So we've got plenty to keep us busy.
Yes,
for the coming
I
years.
was going to say, yeah, a lot going on, and sounds incredibly exciting. And hearing about those union records, I saw some comments coming through about lots of family members who were part of a union. I know that great grandfather was talking about earlier. He was very much a union man. So that's amazing. So thanks so much for joining us, Mike. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the set before you go?
The only thing I'd say is if you get the chance, you've had a look through it. If you've got any questions about it, by all means, please get in touch with us through the website, through Twitter, through Facebook. That's brilliant. The other route would be we are going to be doing a couple of question and answer sessions next week, and it's possible to sign up for those. They're all for free. It'll be online. One on Wednesday, one on Thursday next week. Wednesday 12:30 and Thursday at 7:30, I think. As I say, we'll be doing that. It's possible to sign up through Eventbrite. So have a look out for that, please. And if you do have questions, by all means, come along and ask. That'd be lovely to hear from you.
Okay, thanks so much, Mike. And I think Jessie's got a link to those Q&A sessions. There she is. She's on it. She's on it for us. So yeah, you can sign up there. Thanks so much, Mike. It's absolutely wonderful to talk to you today. When those new records come on, we'll love to have you back to talk about those. So thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'd love to come back in the future. Thanks so much.
That'd be great. Thanks, Mike. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Oh, thanks, Mike. There, so great to talk about all those wonderful record sets. Just incredible. I can't wait to dive in and have a look through the database. Okay, so back to our new records of the week, and we are looking at the Bomber Command losses, 1939 to 1945, and it's an incredibly detailed set again. There is nearly 60,000 brand new records in this set, and it's been compiled by volunteers from the International Bomber Command Centre in Lincolnshire. So again, I think it just highlights the importance of volunteers and getting these wonderful records to us. And yeah, an absolutely prodigious undertaking. And what this set does, it compiles those under bomber command in World War II who lost their lives. And it's been sourced from Rolls of Honour, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, Squadron Association records, POW records. Absolutely fascinating. And again, you can read a lot of information from this set, from name, age, squadron number, service number, birth year, death year, and unit. And what I also love about this set is the contextual information. So you'll find the father and mother's name, next of kin, even the trade that they undertook before the war. You'll also find out where the person who lost their lives was buried or the site of their memorial. And the source website. This is really important. Remember this, we'll come back to it. And I've just popped in a little picture here from the Illustrated London News. This is the operations room of Bomber Command, and it was deep under the ground. Lovely little glimpse there of Bomber Command in our newspapers. And this drawing, I also picked out from the Illustrated London News. It's called Bomber Command Blazing the Trail from June 1942. And it shows a bombing mission on Essen and the Ruhr Valley, so that they're sort of key industrial targets in Germany. And just the sort of the horror, of the bombing, and it's a very atmospheric picture. And Andrews commented he's at least 2 cousins in the losses and now know where their aircraft crashed. Gosh, I mean, that, it must be very moving to be able to see and to find those names in the set there. So we have an example here of a transcription you can find as part of this set. And this is the record of Harry Charles Alley of the Royal Canadian Air Force. And he was just 26 when he was killed. He was a flying officer. And we learn that his father was also named Harry and that his mother was named Elsie Edith, née Matthews. So the level of detail here, it is incredible. And we learn that Harry Charles left behind a wife, Isabella Mabel, and we even learn the date of their marriage, that they married on the 14th of September 1943, and Harry was tragically killed only 2 months later on the 22nd of November 1943. And he is remembered at the Dernbach War Cemetery in Germany, just south of Munich. And I said before that we should check the source website, because this is an absolute goldmine of information. It's probably a bit small to read all that information here that you can see, so I will just go through it. So just be sure to click that link and it will take you through to the source material, and it's a real treasure trove. This is the International Bomber Command Losses Database, the full database here. So you'll find everything from the enlistment information, the aircraft information, and the memorial information with a grave reference, for example. But what you'll also find in this set is about details about the last mission. So the mission in which the pilot or person involved lost their lives. So we learn that Harry's last operation began on the 25th of November 1943, so the day before he died. And he took off from Bourne in Lincolnshire, and it was a night bombing mission. And Frankfurt was the target. There were 262 aircraft sent to bomb that city that night. However, this entry tells us that the German controller correctly surmised that Frankfurt was the target. Cloud cover led to scattered bombing on this operation, 100 bombs landing on the city, which resulted in 80 deaths and 500 people being bombed out. And it kind of reading this, and this mission was sort of seen as a failure, but still that loss of life and the devastation that this one particular raid caused, you know, it's quite staggering, really. Then we learn about Harry's death too, and he was shot down by a Bf 110 flown by a German night flying ace. So this was quite a famous pilot who brought Harry down, and his name was Eckhard Wilhelm von Bonnen, and he had many claims on British aircraft, and Harry was Bonnen's 25th claim. And that's not it. We learn about Harry's life under the heading miscellaneous information. We have his birth date of the 22nd of August 1917. He's born in Ongar in Essex. We learn about the names of his brothers and how they then lived in Vancouver. We learn about his schooling. We learn how he worked as a salesman with Robertson Bakeries, and then as another company as a clerk. So you've got such a broad sense of this person, Harry, from his personal life to his military career, and how he came to sadly lose his life. And he enlisted on the 20th of September 1939, so very soon after the outbreak of war. And we learn about where he trained and when he came to England. And finally, poignantly, how Harry enjoyed all kinds of sports. So again, we're talking with Mike about sort of humanizing and personalizing the past and records. And I think this set is incredibly helpful in doing that. That little bit of information that he enjoyed all kinds of sports. I just found that incredibly moving. So another moving set this week is the Sheffield air raid casualties from 1940 to 1941. Now, these are the lists of the names of those killed during the Sheffield Blitz in 1940 and in other air raids on the city. And in 1940, Sheffield was a city of about 500,000 people with a concentration of heavy industry, so steel and armament factories. So it was a real target for German bombers. And the Sheffield Blitz took place over 2 nights, the 12th and the 15th of December 1940. And particularly bad luck for Sheffield was on the 15th of December 1940. It was a full moon. So ideal bombing conditions, the bomber's moon as it was called. Now, British intelligence managed to find out about the raid on the 15th of December, and German planes were directed away from the factories. However, this diversion led to bombs falling on the city centre, resulting in many deaths. So 660 people lost their lives, 40,000 people were made homeless, 1,500 were injured, and 8,000 were damaged. During the raids and after the raids, six jewelled medals were awarded to the civilian population for bravery. And after the bombing raids, the city was visited by King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. So what information can you get from this particular record set? Well, you get the name of the victim, the age, the birth year, the year of death, as well as other details. And you can see here a little newspaper clipping. This is from the Manchester Evening News from the 13th of December 1940. So that was just after the first raid upon the city. And this incredible photograph, it's like something out of hell, really, shows a burning building during the Sheffield Blitz. You can only just imagine the horror of those 2 nights in December. So this is an index-only set, but like the other sets today, you really get some very useful information. And here's the record for Rita Joan Pearson, who tragically, she was only 20 when she was killed. So really, really very sad. And the information that I found particularly useful about this set here is under other details, and we get Rita's address, where the bomb fell and where she lost her life as Masham Bank Road. So this set can also be very useful for, aside from researching your ancestors, for your house and your street histories too. So sort of building up again that personal history. What losses did we see as we stand on this street today? And I've pinpointed it here on the map, and I always find that quite interesting when I find an address. I'm straight into Google Maps, like looking and on Street View. So this set is a wonderful, very moving record of the losses inflicted, this time on the home front during World War II. Now, our final records of the week have been added to the National Burial Index from 1600 to 1982 and hail from Morley and District in Yorkshire. They have been brought to us by the Morley and District Family History Group, so many thanks. Again, tireless volunteers whose work means that we get to enjoy these wonderful records. Morley is a market town and parish within the Leeds Metropolitan Borough. And fun fact for you, and someone's just mentioned Leeds. Mike's mentioned Leeds. Great minds. Fun fact, Morley is actually the birthplace of Prime Minister and great-grandfather of actor Helena Bonham Carter, Herbert Asquith, who was Prime Minister from 1908 to 1916. And this is a little picture of the house in Morley where Asquith was born. It's pictured in the Daily Mirror when he became Prime Minister in 1908. So Asquith rabbit hole aside, these burial indexes have been derived from various sources, parish registers, bishop transcripts, and printed transcripts. And there are nearly 100,000 new records that have been added this week for Morley and District, covering 19 churches all the way from 1600 to 1982. And as part of these records, you get the name, death year, burial date, burial place, occasionally birth year, and also the place of worship and denomination. So here's an example of a very early record from the Morley collection, and it pertains to Hannah Pickering. And she was buried on the 13th of February, 1656, so very early. I always love just when we get a new record set, how early can I go? So 1656, pretty early. If you can get back that far in Morley, then this record set is for you. And we know that she was buried in St Mary in the Wood in Morley. And you didn't think I'd leave out the newspapers. I couldn't leave out the newspapers. So we've updated 33 of our existing newspaper titles this week. And these updates are to newspapers from all over the place, from England, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, Canada, and even Barbados. So that's the Barbados Agricultural Report that we've updated this week. And if you had to push me for some highlights, well, The Kentish Express is our biggest edition of the week. We've got 60,000 new pages that we've added, spanning the years 1855 all the way up to 1972. Wonderful title, founded in 1855, published in the Kent town of Ashford. And yeah, it wouldn't be a Rose Friday without newspapers. True. And yeah, it was known as a London and local paper in one. My second highlight this week are the additions we've made to the Nottingham Evening Post. That was Nottingham's first ever evening newspaper. And finally, we've added new pages from the 1950s to the Edinburgh Evening News. So we're not leaving out our Scottish titles. And you can find details of all our editions of the week in Jessie's wonderful weekly blog. Now, circling back to our railway theme, I'd like to highlight one of our sets, which is the Great Western Railway. Sometimes I can't say railway without saying wellway. I just did it. I hadn't done it, but I did it. I think it's having the Great Western. Yes, anyway. I'll try not to do it again. Great Western Railway shareholder set from 1832 from 1835, to 1932. And it's a really interesting set that contains some actually quite surprising information. It's much more than a list of just a list of shareholders. So let's find out some more. I'm looking into how we can tie this set to our other record sets. So let's jump into this wonderful set. I really fell down the rabbit hole with this one. So this particular set has been compiled by our friends, the Society of Genealogists. It's an index of shareholders in the Great Western Railway. So it's been created from ledgers now in possession of the Society of Genealogists, and it's got over 570,000 records in all. Now, these records pertain to the Great Western Railway, aka God's Wonderful Railway, which was founded in 1833 and was enabled by an Act of Parliament in 1835. So the railway served to link London with the West Country and Wales, and famed engineer Isambard Kingdom Brunel played a big part in its construction, as did its shareholders, vital for the raising of funds, of course. Now, the ledgers that form this particular collection were referred to by the Great Western Railway as probate books. Now, this is because most of these records actually relate to the death of a shareholder. Indeed, 95% of these records are records that have come about following the death of a shareholder. So the record will contain for an individual the name of the shareholder who is deceased, as well as executors, beneficiaries, and others. And they also relate to an event, such as the disposal of a share under a will. So it's a great record set, and it is particularly useful because it predates civil registration, that key date. So it goes back to 1835. It's mostly from England and Wales. So it's 93% England and Wales, 4% Scottish, 1.4% Irish, and 1% overseas. And I've got this wonderful picture here from the Sphere of 1923 of the St. Bartholomew locomotive, which recorded a record-breaking run in 1907, going as fast as 83 miles per hour. And we can see Mike there, he's a Great Western man himself, like all my family. What information can you get from this wonderful record set? Well, name, title as applicable, birth year, place, county, the date of the event. You might get a death date, a marriage date, or a change of a name. And you might find out the name of a person's executors, their beneficiaries. So using this in conjunction with death and probate information, you really get a remarkable insight into not only the life of your ancestor, the death of your ancestor, and also the finances of your ancestor. Of course, during the Victorian era, there saw a massive investment into the railway, and there was the railway bubble. So that pattern of boom and bust. The railway bubble did see sort of some tangible investment into infrastructure, unlike other bubbles. Okay, and you can see here, this is a clipping from the Freeman's Journal in October 1838, and this is on Great Western Railway stocks, which had partly recovered the depression they sustained yesterday, and the reports which were then current are said to be without foundation. So yeah, again, newspapers I think most newspapers always have like a little section devoted to market. So you will find accounts, if you're interested in economic history, you will find accounts of the share market. So here is an entry from the Great Western Railway Shareholders Collection. We've got a celeb here, really, for none other than Isambard Kingdom Brunel. And the event which is being recorded is his death. So that's the 15th of September, 1859 in Westminster. And this set does contain images, and they are, really, they add a lot more information, as we'll see. So we see what we see here is the probate entry for Isambard Kingdom Brunel, and we see his address, which is Duke Street, Westminster, the date of his death, and probate. So probate came on the 10th of October 1859. We also see the names of his executors being Mary Elizabeth, his relic or widow, his son Isambard, and then Sir Benjamin Hawes and Seth Thompson. And I was curious to know about Sir Benjamin Hawes. He was a politician whose nickname was rather unfortunate, Hawes the Soap Builder. When he was young, he was in the business of soap boiling. I don't think he did it himself, with his father and uncle, and that name stuck with him even though he did it for only a couple of months. Now, I delved into this set a little more just to show how you can link it without other records. And at the top, you can see a probate record from the Great Western Railway Shareholders Collection. And it relates to the death of Mary Elizabeth Agnes Maguire of 12 Wetherby Place in South Kensington, the wife of Constantine Maguire. So her death is on the 10th of June, 1912. Probate follows on the 12th of July. And we can see her beneficiaries here are Florence Rose Maguire, spinster, and Marie Blanche Lucy Ryan. So I was intrigued. Who are these people? Why had she not left anything to her husband? So I dug a little deeper and did a general search for Mary Elizabeth Agnes in our collection. And I found in our newspaper death notices collection an entry from the Essex Newsman on the 15th of June, 1912. And it reads, Maguire, on the 10th of June at 12 Wetherby Place, South Kensington, SW, Mary Elizabeth Agnes, beloved wife of Colonel Maguire, late Essex Regiment. So we've got an Essex, it's in the Essex Newsman, Essex collection, Essex connection with Colonel Maguire being of the Essex Regiment. And we also found her in the probate records, England and Wales Government Probate Index. And that, I don't know if you've used this set, it's wonderful, that information you can get in this probate collection. And used alongside this one, the Great Western Railway Shareholders, it's an absolutely invaluable resource. So we see the same details repeated and the same beneficiaries as listed in the Great Western Railway records. So that's Florence Rose Maguire and Marie Blanche Lucy Ryan. And we learn that Mary had effects of £11,642, 18 shillings and 9 pence. So that's about £1 million today. So Mary Maguire was a millionaire when she passed away. And Linda says, Rosie, do love a rabbit hole. I do, you know me, newspapers and rabbit holes. So you see Mary Elizabeth Agnes in this census return from 1911. She's living in 12 Wetherby Street. So again, that's the address. She's living with her husband Constantine, and with them is Florence Rose, who is 39, and Marie Blanche Ryan, 36. They are, of course, Mary's daughters. So mystery solved. So she was making sure, Mary, upon her death, was making sure that they were looked after, especially for Florence, who was unmarried. It was still a difficult point early in the 20th century for single women, and especially, a bit of a higher class. You wouldn't sort of, although the world of work was opening up for women, it was still sort of a bit of a taboo for someone like Florence to go into the world of work. So then I got intrigued by Florence. What happened to Florence? Did she have a happy ever after? And I found her in the 1921 census in a boarding house, and a nice boarding house in Fitzrovia. So it looks as though that she has financial independence and stability thanks to that inheritance from her mother. And then I drew a blank. I couldn't find her. And so bearing in mind, Florence was in her 40s, going to her 50s actually, what's happened? What's happened to Florence? And then I found a marriage record in 1927, Florence Rose Maguire to Edmund L. Calverley, an older marriage for Florence, so she would have been in her 50s. But it's lovely, and it's quite unusual too, because at that time, there were more women than men in the 1920s, and I was able to find Florence and Edmund in the 1939 register together, with Edmund's daughter from his first marriage. And I carried on looking for Florence Rose Calverley, and I came back full circle. And that's what I love about Findmypast and our genealogy records. I came back to the Great Western Shareholders record set from 1928, and again, Florence Rose is a beneficiary. And her husband then passed away in 1940. Again, she was a beneficiary once more. And we finally, the final trace of Florence is from 1963, the notice of her own probate when Florence died in County Dublin in her 90s. Her father was Irish, so she had that Irish connection there, with assets of about £250,000 in today's money. So yeah, that's the story of the Calverleys and the Maguires with the assistance of the Great Western Shareholders set. So it's a really interesting set that does tie into our other record sets very nicely. Andrew, Rose is appropriately wearing the same colour as Railway High Visibility vests, and thank you. Yeah, thank you. I do like a bit of red. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a really wonderful session. Thanks, Mike, so much for joining us. It was so interesting to hear about all the old railway accidents, and just, yeah, fabulous. So I hope you all have lovely weekends, and we'll be back again, same time, same place next Friday. Goodbye.